Welcome back to the Best Divorce Basics series. My name is Christopher Bruce. I'm a South Florida divorce lawyer, and today's lesson is getting organized, what to gather, and how to get it. And the objective for what we're going through here is to help you understand what information you need to gather as you prepare for the divorce process, as well as a few ways that you can look to get that information. So, why gather documents? Here's the deal. Having the best divorce involves you developing early on a basic understanding of the assets, liabilities that need to be divided in the divorce, as well as each spouse's current and after divorce budget. And to get this information, you need to have your bank statements, pay records, tax returns, records of that nature in order to analyze what's going to need to be analyzed. The more information you can get early on in the divorce, preferably before the divorce starts, the quicker your divorce is going to be over. It's really just that simple. The sooner you get this stuff, the sooner your lawyer can work with you to help get the divorce over. So in this lesson, we're going to go over what documents to gather, as well as how to go about getting some of this information. And in the next lesson in our series, we're going to go over how to analyze the information that you gather and try to turn it into something useful. So when it comes to gathering documents, there's quite a bit of stuff that most of the time needs to be gotten together, and usually you're going to be the one that needs to do this, at least if you want to have the best divorce possible that really gets over with before it begins. It's kind of a pain in the butt to get all of this stuff. Some of you listening may have a CPA, an accountant, or a bookkeeper, or a personal assistant that keeps a lot of this information for you. Some of you listening may have had really no involvement in the marital finances, and finding out that these documents even exist might be a little bit challenging. But if you can get it, and you're not going to be able to find all of these things in most situations, but if you can get the information, what you're going to need are typically 3 years of tax returns, typically 3 years of statements for your checking, savings, investment, and credit card accounts. If there's a business, you're going to want to get 3 years worth of the QuickBook files. You can usually just get the file to your attorney. If there have been any personal financial statements or loan applications filled out in the last 3 years, you're going to want to get those. Those documents and applications contain a lot of information, especially if income or assets are going to be contested. If there's wills or trust documents, or a safety deposit box or an inventory list, you're going to need to get that information. If either party has an employment contract, you're going to want that. Any documents related to real estate that you own, deeds, especially a closing file, you're going to want to get that information. Most of the time your attorney can get the deeds off the internet, but usually the more you can do, the less you will pay your lawyer to do. You're going to need to get the titles to your vehicles, as well as if there's been any lawsuits or judgments against you or your husband or wife, you're going to need to get that information. All life insurance records, promises to pay debts. Typically, your lawyer is going to want phone records, and if your spouse has ever written you anything in writing, like an email or text message or a note explaining the nature and extent of the assets and liabilities, or whether a inherited item is being gifted to you, or anything that could closely relate to any of those things, you're going to need to want to gather that so that you have it available to go over with your lawyer. Not all of this information may down the road be required to get you divorced, but usually all of it helps your lawyer work with you to come up with a plan to get the divorce over with as soon as possible. So why so much? Why so much stuff? Why are we going back several years? Well, In a complex divorce, information going back a few years can be relevant for multiple different reasons. And just the bottom line is it's customary to ask for 3 years of records. So if you're not asking for it from your spouse or their lawyer will be asking for it from you, or at least it's a substantial likelihood. You might as well just get the information now, plan on a 3-year record request time period, and down the road, your lawyer may very well work with you to decide only 1 year is relevant. In some cases that I handle, I only look for 1 year of information. It just depends on the circumstances, but almost all the time, if there's a business that is owned in the family that's going to be part of the divorce, I'm going back 3 years with the records. So you might as well just work on gathering it. So how do you get all this stuff? Well, number one, you need to realize you're probably not going to be able to get everything. In divorce lawsuits, your lawyer will have subpoena power. They'll be able to go to different third-party people like a CPA, financial advisor, or banks directly for information that you don't have access to. It could be the case that your spouse has records or keeps records and accounts in only their name that you've never been able to get into or find any records in the house for. And just realize there's going to probably be several items like that, maybe many items. And if that's the case, it is what it is, and your lawyer will use the legal process to get what needs to be reviewed. But otherwise, as far as getting the information, you at least need to try yourself first. And a lot of the times, most of the records are going to be in the house in a file cabinet, stored on a computer used by either spouse. If the information's not there, at least with joint accounts, most all of the time, you can order all of the statements that your attorney's going to be looking for. In some situations, you might have a shared CPA or financial advisor that's been working with the family, and they may have some of that information, or there may be records of emails sent to those people. And sometimes you might want to consider, if you're really in the dark about everything, having a meeting with a financial advisor with your spouse. The fact that there could be a divorce doesn't need to be mentioned. Really, if you don't have any idea of your finances, you probably should. And if you don't have a financial plan yet, you probably should. So you can meet with your spouse, with the financial advisor, and during that process of coming up with a financial plan for your marriage, you're going to learn a lot about the marital finances. And if your marriage ultimately does not work out, then you won't have a good idea of a lot of the information you might not know right now. So that's something you can do. Some people aren't comfortable doing that. I tell them that they can always work with a financial advisor after the divorce, which is something that they probably should be doing if they're in the dark with their finances. So it's something that will benefit the financial advisor later, and they can also refer to that advisor down the road if the advisor does a really good job. That's something you can consider doing. So once you get the information that you can, what do you do with it? Here's what I'd recommend. Don't keep a paper file out on the kitchen counter with the documents you're gathering for your divorce. Probably don't leave it in an office or home den or anything like that. I'd recommend that you scan everything into an online storage account like Google Drive or Dropbox or anything else that you have set up. And if you don't have a scanner at home, basically take everything to your local office services store, Office Depot, FedEx, Kinko's. A lot of those types of places can take papers that you bring them, and they can scan them into a computer file that they can then email to you. You can then take that file and store it where you need to. Having everything on an online storage account makes it very easy later to get the information to your lawyer. You can just share access to the account with them. You don't have to print things out. Your lawyers aren't paid to copy anything. It's all in a file that can be downloaded by their office, which is very convenient, very efficient. You even save a few trees in the process. Also, doing it this way keeps your spouse from knowing what's going on. As part of getting ready for the divorce, you might determine that you don't want to follow through with it. And if that's the situation, good for you. I hope it's the best situation. Just remember that's a whole lot harder to do if your spouse finds out you're actually planning for divorce. So that's one of the reasons I recommend anything you get, store it online or at least at an office out of the house, nowhere to where your spouse or anyone they know can find out what you're doing. What you're doing is not illegal. There's nothing wrong with it. It's all about organizing everything so that your divorce can be over as soon as it can. And to do that, you have to get this information. You might as well get it now so that you're more prepared. But try to not make what you're doing with the collection efforts absolutely obvious. Coming up in the next lesson in this series, we're going to go over how to review the information that you've gathered, and that will allow you to determine what your divorce settlement might look like. Just as we go over at a lot of these lessons, remember that listening to this course is not a substitute for having a competent divorce lawyer. You should work with an attorney before you take any legal action. And this course doesn't create an attorney-client relationship between you and my law firm. You can certainly work with my law firm. If you have a divorce in Florida, we're happy to work with you. That concludes this lesson. Until the next time, be well. Talk to you soon.